Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this webinar brought to you by the Northeast Recycling Council, NERC, and the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association, NWMOA, about environmental benefits calculators. I'm Lynn Rubenstein. I'm the Executive Director of NERC, and with me, I have Terry Goldberg, who is the Executive Director of NWMOA. Please note, the webinar is being recorded. It will be posted on the NERC website and on the NWMOA website, as will the PowerPoint presentations by tonight. You will also notice that there's a handout. If you look on the right-hand side, there's a drop-down handouts. It's a PDF with hyperlinks to environmental benefits calculators, not just the ones that we're hearing about today, but others as well. And that too will be on our websites. We're going to do the introductions to all the presenters first, and then they'll do their presentations, and then we're going to hold questions to the end. But please start populating the questions area. So how do you do that? You type it into the questions area on the GoToWebinar dashboard. So if you don't have that whole dashboard open right now, there's a little orange arrow at the top right of your screen. Click on that, and that will drop down the dashboard. And you'll see on there a gray bar that says questions, and right below it, where it says handouts, you click on the questions one, you type your questions, hit return, and voila. And after our 3 presentations, Terry will facilitate asking the questions of our presenters. You can download the handout at any time during today's webinar. So first, we're going to hear from Jared Bridge. Jared will be discussing the WARM and RECON tools. Jared is a physical scientist at EPA's Office of Resource Conservation and Recovery, where he works on projects related to life cycle analytics, systems thinking, and international sustainable materials management topics. He co-led the development and design of EPA's sustainable materials management prioritization tools and serves as the main point of contact for EPA's waste reduction model, better known as WARM, which he's going to be presenting about today. He received a BS in biology and a BS in forensic science, very exciting, from the University of New Haven, and an MS in sustainable engineering from Villanova University. After we hear from Jared, we'll hear from Patty Dillon. She'll be presenting about the Electronics Environmental Benefits Calculator. Patty is a Senior Director of Criteria and Category Development at the Global Electronics Council. She leads the team that develops the technical performance requirements, also known as criteria, that define sustainability leadership for the products and services covered by GEC's EPEAT eco-label. At GEC, she has also designed and managed the development of the benefits calculator. So this is her baby. Patty has 30 years of research, facilitation, and program management experience addressing a broad range of environmental policy and sustainability topics, with extensive work in electronics, plastics, packaging, and standards development. Before joining GEC, Patty was an independent consultant for clients in the public and private sectors and a research associate at Tufts University. Importantly, she is a former member of NERC staff, where she managed the Toxins and Packaging Clearinghouse for 10 years. It probably should be your top credential, Patty. and finally, we'll be hearing from Dana Gunders. She's the Executive Director of REFED, a national nonprofit working to end food loss and waste across the food system by advancing data-driven solutions. Dana will be presenting to the REFED tool. She's a national expert on food systems and was one of the first people to raise the alarm about how much food is wasted across the country and subsequent impacts on the environment, economy, and food security. For almost a decade before her work with REFED, Dana was a senior scientist at the Natural Resource Defenses Council, where she authored the landmark Wasted report about food waste and testified before Congress. She helped launch the Save the Food campaign with the Ad Council, providing customers with easy-to-use strategies to reduce food waste in their own kitchen, as well as authored the popular Waste-Free Kitchen Handbook. So in a moment, we're going to be hearing from Jared, who's going to be our first presenter. As a reminder, please post questions in the question box. This is being recorded. The webinar recording will be available as well as the presentations. And with that, we're going to say, Jared, thank you so much, very much, and I look forward to your presentation. And yes, we can see your presentation.
Great, thank you. And many thanks to NERC and Numoa for inviting me to participate in the webinar today. And as was just mentioned, I'll be talking about WARM and RECON from EPA's Sustainable Materials Management Program. And so I thought I'd start first by giving a bit of background about EPA's SMM program that these tools sit under. And so back in the early 2000s, after about 20 years of waste management under RCRA, EPA started to recognize that our waste program might need to evolve to start meeting the challenges and opportunities of the future. And so we started to think that we might need to shift away from talking just about waste to a more holistic systems level approach around materials management. And so EPA's 2009 report, the Sustainable Materials Management, The Road Ahead, which you can see on screen here, laid out the concept of SMM for the first time and described it as a systemic approach to using and reusing materials more productively and sustainably over their entire life cycles. And so the Road Ahead provided really strong recommendations to government for fulfilling its role in achieving SMM. And it also created an analytical framework to help identify where environmental impacts might be occurring within materials life cycles in the United States. This is so that we could help prioritize where some of our efforts go towards reducing those environmental impacts to make sure we're getting bang for our buck, so to speak. And so this analysis from that report helped solidify EPA's priorities for SMM and set the tone for the work undertaken over the last decade or so by the Office of Resource Conservation and Recovery. And so these priorities have included food waste, electronics, plastics, the built environment, and more. And EPA has also been working to build and improve a base of information, data, and tools that support the lifecycle-oriented work under SMM. And so I'll be spending the rest of the time talking about a couple of those tools. So the first one I'll be getting into is the waste reduction model, more commonly referred to as WARM, which many of you are likely familiar with. WARM is one of EPA's most useful tools for helping municipalities, states, researchers, and industry groups begin thinking about waste from a life cycle perspective. For over 20 years, WARM has been helping users calculate the greenhouse gas emission implications of waste management scenarios, with energy use and economic impacts being more recent enhancement to the analyses that WARM conducts. And WARM includes around 60 different material types commonly found in municipal solid waste and construction and demolition debris streams. And users can model the impacts of managing those materials through several waste management pathways. And these include source reduction, recycling, combustion, composting, anaerobic digestion, and landfilling. And WARM is most commonly used in its Excel spreadsheet form, which most of the screenshots in this presentation come from. But a version is also available for the OpenLCA software program, if you're familiar with that. And so who are the WARM stakeholders? WARM, as you can see on screen here, has a really wide range of stakeholders that use it and have used it for a variety of interesting projects and analyses. So WARM has helped varying levels of government plan and make decisions about their solid waste management programs. And it's been used in academic research, school projects, and analyses by different industry and waste management groups. So getting more into the meat of WARM, the main analysis that WARM helps with is a comparison between baseline and alternative management scenarios that the user defines. And so I'll show a few slides to demonstrate this in the Excel version of the tool, which is shown on screen here. And so the idea is that you can create a baseline scenario on the left side of the screen here, which typically corresponds to the business as usual or current practice at the municipality or whatever organization you decide to study. And so that baseline scenario, along with the GHG emission, energy use, and economic impacts that go along with it, are then compared to the alternative scenario and all of its impacts that are entered on the right-hand side. And so this alternative scenario may correspond to a goal that your organization has, maybe, for example, to compost some percentage of food next year or reduce the amount of plastic that needs to be managed. Or it could correspond to certain infrastructure changes that might be on the horizon that could impact your waste management plan. For example, maybe a new composting facility is being built nearby, which will allow for more composting in the future. And so to go through this analysis, you would begin by putting the tonnages of the various material types that you'll be managing in your scenarios into the corresponding boxes or cells that best describe how those materials are being or will be managed. And so you can see on screen here the list of material types listed down the left-hand side of the table and the various materials management pathways listed across the top. And so we can think through a really simple example just for the sake of showing how WARM works. So let's say your municipality's current waste management scenario, so the baseline scenario, includes 100 tons of newspaper going to landfill. So you'd put that in the corresponding blue cell as you see it on the left-hand side of the screen here. But let's say your municipality has a goal to recycle all 100 of those tons of newspaper next year. So by inputting that into the corresponding cell on the left side, WARM will calculate the GHG, energy, and economic benefits of making that change. And so to do those calculations, WARM uses factors like the ones that you see on screen here. So this table shows the GHG emissions factors per ton of each material type that gets managed through each pathway. So for instance, if we're looking at corrugated containers, just as an example right at the top, you can scan across and see that, for example, recycling 1 ton of corrugated containers results in a savings of 3.14 metric tons of CO2 equivalents. Whereas landfilling that same 1 ton would result in the generation of 0.18 metric tons of CO2 equivalents, and so on and so forth for all of the materials and pathways. And so you'll notice that some of the pathways may result in net GHG savings, which is the ones in parentheses or negative numbers, and others result in net GHG emissions. So those are the positive numbers, are the ones without parentheses. And this is because WARM takes into account the various sources and sinks of emissions throughout the life cycle of these materials. And this includes the production of these materials in the first place and all the steps in their life cycles along the way, except for the use phase, which is the only life cycle stage that isn't included in the WARM analysis. So the takeaway here is that factors like these ones you see on screen here, which have been modeled and improved over the last 20 years, are at the heart of the WARM analysis and the outputs for GHG, energy use, and economic impacts. And the calculations and modeling assumptions that are all baked into these factors can all be found in our extensive documentation chapters on EPA's website. So, but now getting back to our example, just a quick reminder, we were hoping to use WARM to find out what might happen if we started recycling 100 tons of newspaper next year instead of landfilling it like we did this year. And so now that you guys have an idea of what's going on under the hood of WARM, we can start looking at some results. So according to WARM, making that change that we were just talking about would result in a savings of about 186 metric tons of CO2 equivalents worth of greenhouse gas emissions. And this is about the same as taking 40 cars off the road for a year. And it would also save about or over 1,600 million BTUs worth of energy. And then showing some other categories of results. This change would also create just under 600 hours of labor, increase the wage output by about $17,000, and increase tax revenue by almost $5,000. And so WARM also displays these impacts and benefits as a production versus end of life split, meaning that we can get a sense for how much our interventions at the end of life compare to impacts related to the production of the materials in both scenarios. So you can see here the results for GHG emissions. In both scenarios, the blue part of the bars are responsible for the lion's share of the GHG emissions, and this corresponds to the production of the newspapers in the first place. And so the reddish bars in both cases are the sort of end of life stage, with on the left being landfilling and on the right being recycling. And you can see that those red portions are comparatively smaller, and we can see that even though recycling the newspapers does reduce GHG emissions compared to landfilling, there might still be potentially significant emissions resulting from the production of materials. And so this is where the life cycle based aspects of WARM really shine, where it helps us put our efforts at the end of life into perspective. So maybe making this change is beneficial enough for us to justify, or maybe information like this can inspire us to think about these materials in the context of their entire life cycles. So maybe there's an initiative that we can undertake to source reduce these materials to avoid their production altogether, while still meeting the need for the material in a different way. And so WARM provides this information for all the impact areas that we saw on the previous slide. So GHGs, energy use, wages, taxes, and labor hours. And so it's important to consider these life cycle based impacts across all of these dimensions so as to avoid unintended consequences or burden shifting between those impact areas. And so, of course, these results that we just went through are for an extremely simple scenario looking at just one material type. but you could assess an entire diverse waste stream across dozens of material types and multiple management pathways at the same time. And so this can be useful for future planning of waste management programs, and it can also potentially help decide which materials might provide the most environmental bang for your buck by including in a management program. And so now we talked a little bit about what WARM is like now, but each year EPA really tries to improve the WARM model. And sorry, I'm having trouble with my screen. To improve the model interfaces and the documentation material in the background to ensure that WARM is as relevant and accurate as possible. And so just a little bit about what we're up to this year to work on these improvements. EPA is looking to make some model improvements to a few particular components, including how we model the management of wood flooring and the food waste material categories, as well as the way we model soil carbon storage as part of the composting pathway. And so I'll give a little plug for a presentation you'll hear later. We'll be working with ReFed and some of the data and information included in their impact calculator to help us with these food waste updates. So be sure to stick around to learn more about that tool a little later. The economic impacts in WARM that we went through, so the wages, labor hours, and tax revenue, these are tied closely with EPA's Recycling Economic Information Report, or the REI report, as it's commonly known. And EPA just released an updated version of that report in 2020. So we'll be updating the economic impacts in WARM to match that new report. And then these last two items here have a bit longer of a time horizon, with the web-based user interface expected within a couple of years, alongside the addition of more life cycle environmental impact categories, potentially to include things like water use and toxicity impacts, among others. And we're hoping that the web-based user interface might standardize the user experience across all the platforms that a user might come to WARM through. So rather than having a couple of different interfaces like how we have now in Excel and OpenLCA version, everyone will have the same experience working through a version of WARM that would be just up on our website. So hopefully that streamlines things for users. And so you can find WARM and more information about it at the URL on screen here. And so with that, now I guess I'll move right on into discussing another EPA tool called the Recycled Content, or RECON tool. And EPA created the RECON tool to help companies and individuals estimate the environmental impacts from purchasing or manufacturing materials with varying degrees of post-consumer recycled content. And so estimates provided by the RECON tool are intended to support voluntary reporting initiatives, which could include EPA's Comprehensive Procurement Guidelines, or CPG program. And RECON was developed with the key users in mind being purchasers, whereas WARM was mostly developed for waste managers. And RECON calculates the benefits of alternative recycled content purchasing decisions by calculating the benefits of an alternative scenario versus a business as usual or baseline scenario, similarly to what we saw in WARM. And so the RECON tool actually does use the same data that WARM does, and it has been updated with data from the most recent version of WARM. And RECON is available both as a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet as well as a web-based calculator on our website. And environmental impacts in RECON and WARM are both calculated using the life cycle-based perspective, as we previously discussed. And this perspective helps reflect both upstream and downstream impacts from the point of use. And so as such, these factors provided in the tools provide an account of the net benefit of these actions to the environment. And I would like to note, however, the life cycle approach in RECON isn't appropriate for use in life cycle inventories. The methodology for calculating the impacts isn't always consistent with inventory protocols, so it may not be appropriate for that use, but otherwise we'll dive in further. So in order to use RECON, you'll first need a bit of information to provide for the tool to run the calculations. So for instance, you'll need the amounts of the various materials being purchased or manufactured, the current or baseline level of post-consumer recycled content as a percentage of those materials, and the change in recycled content percentage that you want to model in the alternative scenario. And so now let's set up just a hypothetical scenario for using the tool. Let's say we work at a large company that purchases, say, 100,000 pounds of office paper each year. I totally made that number up, so hopefully it's realistic, but who knows? We'll just run with it. So let's say that paper we currently buy is manufactured with an average of, say, 5% post-consumer recycled content. So that 5% is our baseline. But let's say we found a new paper provider that can supply that amount of office paper with an average of 25% recycled content. And we want to know what the emissions and energy benefits might be if we were to switch suppliers to this new one. And so we can use the Recon tool to find that out. So we'll go through this example using the web browser version of Recon. So the first thing we do once we came to the Recon tool would be to start inputting the data that we laid out on the previous slide. And so the first option here is to enter a description of the materials that you want to examine that correspond to the material categories that you see in the second column here. So this is totally optional, and the column all the way on the right can help you decide which materials will be best to use for your situation. Next, we would enter the amount of each material that we're purchasing or manufacturing in pounds. So that's that third column, or the one directly in the middle. And once we put that information in, the column for the amount purchased in tons will automatically be calculated. And so it's important to note that there are different materials of the same basic material. So for instance, steel drums and steel rods, if you were inputting those, they could be included in the same row. And so if you do not have the weight information for certain materials, we also include a unit converter sheet, which provides some conversion factors for material types. Okay, so based on the scenario we laid out, we want to find the material type that best describes the materials we're examining, so office paper in this case. And so further down the list from what we saw on the previous screen, we can see office paper as one of the default options. So since we're lucky enough to have an easy match here, we don't need to add a description, so we can just go ahead and enter the pounds of office paper that we purchase. So we mentioned 100,000 pounds, which is then automatically calculated to the 50 tons of office paper. And so then we can move to the next step. So next we'll be adding our recycled content percentages for the purchase materials that we're analyzing. So first, we'll enter the baseline or current recycled content as a percentage of the material. And so this should ideally reflect the current proportion of recycled content in the materials. And so if you don't know those percent recycled content in your baseline scenario, if you click the Set All button in this column, you could use a default values that's can be seen as sort of the average of the current market for that material. And that'll fill in the baseline values. And then you can remove the ones that you don't need. So once that's all taken care of, we'll enter the alternate recycled content percentage for each material. And so this value should be an increase or a change in the recycled content of materials purchasing that we want to measure with the tool. And so you'll see that all the way on the right-hand side, there's sort of a typical recycled content range for each material that can help give an idea of what might be some realistic bounds on what can be done with increasing recycled content in the various materials. And then finally, at the bottom of the input table here, you'll see buttons for GHG and energy results. And so once you're all set, you can click on those to get the results of your analysis. And so just putting in those numbers based on our scenario, looking again for the office paper line, we said our current supplier provides paper with 5% recycled content, and our potential new supplier can bring that up to 25%. So you can see those entered here. So now that we have that all entered, we can click on the buttons at the bottom and start to go through our results. So here is what the Recon tool provides for GHG emissions based on what we had entered. And so the emission factors in the calculation include upstream manufacturing emissions, carbon sequestration, and avoided disposal emissions. And so you can see that Recon provides these results in two different units, metric tons of CO2 equivalent and metric tons of carbon equivalent, as well as all the way at the bottom, you can see the equivalencies, the equivalency of annual emissions of passenger cars. And so making this change here, we see that it could save about 40 metric tons of CO2 equivalents. which is roughly the same as taking 9 cars off the road for a year. And then similarly with the energy results, same idea, but the units for the energy results are in millions of BTUs. And so sorry, I lost my spot. It looks like this change would save roughly about almost 170 million BTUs. And that change could pay off to the tune of over 1,400 gallons of gasoline from being consumed. And so just as with the example when we went through WARM, this was a very simple scenario. You can model these recycled content changes in several materials at once and see what the overall benefits would be for instance, a coordinated purchasing plan focused on increasing recycled content in a range of purchases. And one last thing I'll note about Recon, the data used in these calculations are the same as those used for WARM. So there's consistency between the two tools. To this date, we haven't developed any documentation materials to accompany Recon, but we will be changing that later this year with a dedicated documentation chapter similar to those that we create for WARM. So that'll be a big improvement in the user experience and understanding of what's going on underneath Recon. And so that wraps up my presentation on these two tools. And these are just a small sampling of the information and data available through EPA's SMM program. So if you're interested in learning more about SMM or about these tools, you can see the links on screen here, or you can feel free to reach out to me directly anytime for more specific questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Jared. That was tremendous. And frankly, more overwhelming than I had expected. So great to see. Thank you so much for that. It's really helpful seeing the exact examples. And so now we're going to switch to electronics and with a focus on green products. And we're going to hear from Patty Dillon. So Patty, we can see your screen, and thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Lynn and Terry, for the invitation to present today on GEC's electronic environmental benefits calculators. Jared, I really appreciated your presentation because I will tell you that we, in fact, incorporated some of the WARM data when we initially developed the calculators many years ago. So appreciate that. So I'm going to start my presentation with a quick overview of the Global Electronics Council for those of you who may not be familiar with our organization. I'll then provide some background on GEC's Type 1 eco-label called EPEAT. EPEAT is used globally by large-scale purchasers, national, state, and local governments, as well as private sector purchasers to identify and procure sustainable electronic products. The electronics benefit calculators are used by purchasers to calculate and communicate the reduction in environmental impacts of purchasing EPEAT products, so that background is important. And it's also used to calculate the impact of extending the product life, reusing or recycling the product as well. So the Global Electronics Council, or GEC, we're a mission-driven not-for-profit with a goal of achieving a world of only sustainable electronic products and services. Now at GEC, we embrace the benefits of technology, but not at the expense of people and planet. There are many, many opportunities to reduce environmental and social impacts of technology, and at GEC, we are working to advance sustainable electronics by leveraging the power of the purchaser. So how do we do this? GEC supports large-scale institutional purchasers in both the public and private sectors. We provide them with tools and resources that enable them to communicate their interest in buying sustainable technology products and services. Procurement specifications and contracts send a very strong signal to the market. providing an incentive for manufacturers to change how they design, produce, and provide services to their customers. As you can see on this slide, we provide a variety of tools and resources, from training to contract language, purchaser guides on select cutting-edge topics that our purchasers are interested in, such as labor and human rights, how do you integrate that into procurement, cloud services procurement, and we're releasing one on circularity. But GEC is best known for its resource, EPEAT. It is the leading Type 1 eco-label in the world. And in 2020 alone, we documented more than $2.2 billion, yes, that's a B, billion dollars in IT spend by large-scale purchasers on EPEAT registered products. So that's a lot of money talking, and a major driver for brands to design and manufacture their products and offer services that meet EPEAT. So for purchasers using EPEAT, we further support them with, as shown here, the benefits calculator, which I'm going to talk about today. But we also have an annual purchaser recognition and awards program that really helps purchasers to celebrate, for us to celebrate, and purchasers to celebrate their accomplishments in purchasing more sustainable products. And that in July of this year, we'll have that annual awards ceremony. So a little bit more on EPEAT. Currently, EPEAT covers 6 product categories. You can see here on the screen, it's 5 IT product categories: computers and displays, imaging equipment, mobile phones, servers, and televisions. We recently added in November of 2020 a non-IT product, photovoltaic modules, solar panels, and inverters. And we have currently electronics benefits calculators covering those 5 IT categories shown here. We do expect to add a photovoltaics calculator later this year. Now, in addition, we have 2 additional categories that are coming soon. The first will be launching in this summer, network equipment. And this actually covers enterprise switches and routers, where you would find, for example, in data centers. But it also covers small routers. And those are those little devices that you've been provided by your internet or other service providers to route traffic and in your homes or businesses. So calculators for these products will be added as well. So the electronic benefits calculator, just a little bit of more background on EPEAT. So the benefits calculators estimate the environmental benefits of conforming to EPEAT. And to qualify, a product must meet technical performance criteria that address life cycle environmental impacts. So as illustrated here, criteria address raw material extraction through material and component manufacturing, product use, and end of life, but also circularity, recycling, reuse, etc. So it's not a linear, there is some circularity and reintroduction of materials. EPEAT criteria are bucketed into 4 sustainability impact areas: climate change mitigation, sustainable use of resources, reduction of chemicals of concern, and corporate environmental, social, and governance, or ESG performance. Now, in the climate change mitigation module, to give you that bucket, to give you an idea, we have criteria around product energy efficiency, for example, Energy Star, as well as Beyond Energy Star. But we also have criteria that address the greenhouse gas emissions upstream in the product life cycle from manufacturing various components, which are are energy intensive and therefore release a lot of greenhouse gases. So we have criteria that address upstream embodied carbon. For sustainable use of resources, things like recycled content in the product, designing the product for reuse and recycling, extending the product life, for example, for notebook computers, a longer life battery, for example. And we also address take back and responsible end of life management. Reduction of chemicals of concern, we have EU ROS and REACH restrictions, restrictions on bromine and chlorine in plastics, and for example, flame retardants. We also have criteria around substance inventory and alternatives assessment. And then finally, in corporate ESG performance, we have criteria that address auditing for labor issues in the supply chain, as well as worker health and safety, responsible mineral sourcing, and corporate reporting. Now, in the benefits calculator, we quantify the results of meeting EP criteria to the extent that we can quantify results. So, for example, we can quantify the results of Energy Star, recycled content, that longer life battery, reducing some of the chemicals of concern, but there are currently criteria that we're not able to calculate the benefits of. For example, design criteria about how you design a product so that you can more easily disassemble it for recycling. And also corporate ESG performance, particularly those social issues, we are not calculating those at this point. So the electronics and environmental benefits calculator. So what does it do? It basically helps organizations demonstrate the impact of their sustainable procurement decisions, and most importantly, to communicate those results to both internal and external stakeholders. So it quantifies two sets of life cycle benefits. First, it calculates the benefits of purchasing products that conform to EPEAT. And then it separately calculates the benefits of extending the product life cycle as well as reuse and recycling. Now you might say, well, why do we separate those out? And the reason is we separate these out in the calculations as well as the data inputs, and I'll show you in a minute. But one of the main reasons we do this is because the outcome of extending the product life and recycling, those activities that are not embedded in the product that you're purchasing, a longer life battery, we can calculate the benefits of that, and you're purchasing that with the EP product. But when it comes to purchaser behavior, what the purchaser chooses to do with a product after they, when they have it on their desktop, that's really it's independent, and it's really about user behavior. So for example, whether the user chooses to repair a product or to recycle it, and therefore, the choices consumers make later, it's not going to be accrued in actually purchasing that product. So that's why we separated those out. And I'm going to go into this. You'll see how you can bring them all together in the results as well. So in designing the calculator, we really wanted to make it easy for the user. We also make it transparent, and there's all kinds of documentation on our website as to what are the various assumptions that go in. But we find it's really important to make the tool easy for the user, or they're not necessarily going to use the tool. So we basically have only two required data inputs, and that is the number of units of the product, whether it's a computer desktop, a notebook, a server, whatever that product is, the number of units purchased by EP tier. Now, this is something that if you do not have this information, it is something you can actually get from your vendors. And I'm happy to follow up with information on how you might do that. The second required data input is on region of use. And region of use, basically, as I said, EPEAT is a global eco-label. And so in order to provide the calculation for greenhouse gas emissions, energy cost, et cetera, we really need to know what region of the world you're using the product in. So you have a choice of like North America, Europe, Asia, et cetera. And this will basically account for the regional energy grid mix in whatever region you're using the product. So then the user can also choose to enter data into several optional data fields. Now, these include the cost of electricity per kilowatt hour. Now, this is optional because a purchaser might, if you're a really large purchaser, let's say you're a federal agency and you are actually purchasing EPEAT registered products that are going to be deployed all over the country. Well, your cost of electricity might vary depending on where you're actually using the equipment. So you might not want to customize that. But if you, for example, are an organization that has a single location or a campus, for example, you can actually customize the results of the results of the benefits calculator for your cost savings by inputting your actual cost. The other two areas of data that you can actually input, optional, is how long you plan to use the product and how many products you're donating for reuse and you're sending for recycling. And this is a really cool option. And the reason why this is cool is that it allows purchasers to test different scenarios, kind of like what Jared was talking about with Recon or Warm. They can basically see what the impact of their decision, for example, or a pending decision to keep the product in service, for example, for 1 or 2 additional years, and then avoid those upstream environmental impacts associated with manufacturing these electronic devices, which is very energy intensive. So those are the data inputs, again, simplified. And I'm going to show you a data screen in a minute. But the other area, the final thing that the calculator does, of course, is results. And the results are in common metrics. Similar to what Jared was talking about, we have energy use, greenhouse gas reduction in energy use, greenhouse gas emissions, solid waste generation, toxics, and cost. There are actually a couple other ones that you'll see in the outputs, which includes water conservation and another one that I'm not coming to the top of my head right now. So those are the various results that you can get from the calculator. So now let's take a look at the tool itself. Now, because of lag time, I'm actually providing screenshots. Please, know that these are screenshots, but I encourage you to go to the link here at the bottom of the page. And when you click on that link, this is what you'll see on your page. It'll open up to a list of the available environmental benefits calculators, imaging equipment, TV, mobile phones, servers, computer displays. And this is actually the results button, which you'll hear me talk about. And so here, what we're looking at right here is in advance of the call, clicked on the computer and display icon, and clicking on that basically provided me with a drop-down menu of the product categories covered by EPEAT so that I can enter data. And the one in my screen cut off the 5th category, which in addition to desktops, monitors, notebooks, and tablets would be integrated desktop computers. Each of these each of these icons, if you go to servers, for example, you can choose between rack servers and blade servers, for example. So when you enter data for multiple products, like let's say, for example, I bought desktops, monitors, notebooks, and tablet computers. So the calculator does allow you to aggregate the results. So you just hold off on pushing the results until you've actually entered data into the various drop-down fields. You can also aggregate mobile phones and servers along with your computer and displays, but unfortunately right now, imaging and TV, you can't aggregate those results because it's on a different platform. So that is what you'll see. Now let's look at what we would find if we click on the desktop computer. So I clicked on the plus icon for desktop computers, and I got this drop-down data input field. So any of the product categories, any of the product types that you saw listed on the previous page will result in a drop-down like this. What you'll see here is, as I said, the required data input fields. So the inputs, again, are the number of EPEAT registered products by EPEAT tier, and then the region of use, which I chose North America. There's also a bunch of really cool icons here, which I have not, I don't have any to share with you in the screenshots, but these little information icons basically walk you through some of the data and what you need, etc. So that's it for required data inputs. Now, optional data inputs, as mentioned, you can input the unit energy cost during use and specify, whether it's dollars or yen or whatever it is that you're using. And then also here, you can choose how long do you plan to use the products on average in months. And there's an assumption that is actually provided here before you enter data that tells you what the assumption is. So for some products, for example, it's 48 months. So if you put in 48, you're not going to see any benefits. You would have to go above the average lifespan that's documented in the literature. And then you can also choose how many products you plan to donate for reuse, as well as recycling at the end of life. After you enter the data for various products, you would then hit the results button, which is not shown right here, and it is going to take you to the results page. Now, this screenshot, we have different views that all actually, there's a lot of drop-down menus. So you can see down here, these blue rows allows you to basically open up different results. But let's take a look first at the main results. Along the top here are listed the benefits metrics that are calculated here. Now, there is another screen where you can actually choose which metrics you want to include in your calculator results, and these are the ones that I chose. So you have two different ways to express energy savings in megajoules and kilowatt hours. Some purchasers want one versus the other. We have greenhouse gas emission reductions expressed as global warming potential, kilograms of CO2 equivalents. We have non-hazardous solid waste, water consumption savings, toxic substances, material conservation, and then some cost savings, both for solid waste as well as energy. And then what you have here is the two main calculations that I talked about earlier, and that is what are the benefits of purchasing EPEAT products, and what are the benefits for whatever optional data fields you entered for extending the life of the product, reuse and recycling. And then you get a total. So what I'll do now is let's take a look at this Show Me More Details, and let's take a look at what other data is available. So what you have here is it allows you in this is Show Me More Data. So we were looking above here initially. So now we're in the Show Me More Data. And here you can get a breakdown of results by product category, which would be like computers and displays, mobile phones, servers, by product type. So if you wanted to break down your results by notebook computers, monitors, desktop computers, you can actually do that as well. And it also breaks down the results by life cycle phase. So here, for example, I show the product by product category. I pre-populated this, the calculator. I did not put any data in for mobile phones. I put data in for servers and computers and displays. And again, you can use this drop-down menu here to break the servers and computers and displays down further by product type. And then here you have the opportunity to break down your results by product life cycle phase. This would be for all products. If you want to know the breakdown by individual products, you can look at the breakdown by mobile phones, servers, and computers and displays. But this is all the products that are represented, the servers and computers and displays up here. And it basically breaks down the results so that you can look at what are the environmental benefits accruing to me upstream in the product life cycle. So from raw material extraction, product manufacture, and transport. Some people would call that cradle to gate. And then if you want to know what energy, what's my savings while I'm operating that product, you can see the product energy use. And this is important because there are some purchasers who want to break out any accrued benefit from Energy Star separate from other criteria. And finally, you can break out optional extended life, reuse, and recycling. So that again is if you've extended the product life or you're choosing to reuse or recycle the products. And then all of these are also, you have the same total. So if you went up to the top, these numbers here are going to match your benefits above. And again, you can do this for each of the products you've entered. And then finally, what we provide in the calculator, similar to what Jared was talking about for WARM and Recon, is we provide equivalencies. So in this case, the results that I showed before, energy savings is equivalent to how many powering US households per year, greenhouse gas emissions, it's all about passenger cars removed from the road, solid waste generation, water savings, how many Olympic-sized pools can you fill? So you can get a visualization of this data. And then finally, a lot of people like to manipulate the data. So the calculator tool does provide an Excel download of the results, both the results that I showed, any of the results that you're generating, you can actually download them. So whether it's the equivalencies or the basic data, it's all available. So that is the electronics environmental benefits calculator provided here. This is actually a different web site than I said before. I gave you the EPEAT one earlier on. This is actually on the GEC website, which is the benefits calculators, and this page will actually take you to a page that you'll have all the user guides as well as access to the calculators. If you want to jump right into the calculators, that is the link on the EPEAT website, which would give you that screenshot of all the calculators. If you have any questions, you the tool, please. Happy to answer any questions. And we have folks that can actually help you with benefits calculations if you are indeed purchasing EPEAT registered products. So
that was great. Thank you. Patty knows that I use these calculators every year in great depth, and that was tremendous to see. Thank you so very, very much, Patty. I'm now going to turn it over to Dana. And I just want to note as I go to Dana that we now have available in the handout box Jared's presentation, Patty's presentation, as well as the document with hyperlinks to webinar, to calculators. And Dana is going to do something very cutting edge. And Dana, would you mind speaking so I can just hear your beautiful, there you go, gorgeous. Yes, Dana is going to be live and in action. So, Dana?
I can't tell if you can see me for some reason.
I don't see you, but I see your screen. And I don't know if you could make the screen larger.
I can make the screen larger. I'm sorry, I'm not
visible. Yeah,
not
weird.
cooperating.
Yep, been there, done that.
Yeah.
But if it's possible, I don't know if there's an equivalent full screen option here.
How is that?
Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation, everyone. It's great to be here again. Sorry about the webcam. My name's Dana Gunders. I am the executive director of an organization called ReFed. In case you're not familiar with us, ReFed is a national nonprofit that is entirely focused on ending food loss and waste across the food system. And we do that by really trying to focus on the data. And so our work falls into 3 pillars. We try to provide data and insights on the topic, and that's really where we'll focus today. But we also do a bunch of work to bring more capital into the space. That's private investment, philanthropic as well as public, and match that capital with innovation that's happening in the field. And then we act as kind of a hub and a connector in the space, working with lots of different types of stakeholders. To that end, I can't present to a group like this and not at least invite you to join our very newly launched Food Waste Action Network. So if this is a topic that you're interested in or that you're engaging on, we are starting to build out a platform to really build community around this issue. So the Food Waste Action Network will have networking opportunities, lunch and learns, demo days of different technologies and other innovations and solutions that are coming out, as well as some other programming. So please do join us. And I'm realizing this doesn't have the link, so I'll try to throw that in the chat during our Q&A session. Sorry about that. Also, we'll be doing a whole series of webinars on the roadmap that I'll tell you just a little bit about coming up here. So stay tuned for that. Our next one is June 30th, and we'll really be diving into specific solutions around food waste reduction. All right, thanks for that 1-minute PSA, and now we'll dive in. So ReFed, what I'm about to show you is we launched a new analysis in this past February, and there's an interactive tool that can be used. There's a calculator that is part of that, and some of it's more of like a tool than a calculator, but you'll kind of see what I mean when I do this. Just to level set, because we get this question a lot, our analysis was really anchored on surplus food. So everything you'll see is really anchored on this concept of surplus food, which we define as anything that is unsold or unused by a business or uneaten at home. So that includes things that have been served but not eaten in restaurants, as well as food that's uneaten at home and then in businesses. And then depending on where that food goes, we define it to be these different destinations. So if it gets donated, we define that as being rescued. If it goes to composting or anaerobic digestion, animal feed, we call that recycling. And then only when it's going to landfill, incineration, not harvested, down the drain, those are the types of destinations we do consider food waste. So I like to get that level set up front so that people aren't confused as I go along. What we did to get to what you're about to see is that we took about 50 different data sets. We combined those with academic studies, case studies, industry papers, information directly from organizations that either have a product in this arena or work on it in some way, expert interviews. We combined that all in our own methodology. We worked with Deloitte on some of the modeling, ran that by people in the field, and came out with 2 related products. One is the ReFed Insights Engine. That's what I'm going to hop on the screen in a moment and show you. That allows you to do 4 things: understand the problem of food waste, analyze solutions, find organizations that are working on the topic, and then calculate the impact. So we'll show you that in just a second. But as a complement to that, we also launched what we call the Roadmap to 2030. And the way we went about all this is we actually had a list of about 80 different solutions that we wanted to model. We were not able to get the data to really model about half of those. So we have 42 solutions we were able to model. We have another 40 that we weren't. And we categorized those into 7 key action areas to kind of provide the main concepts that we wanted people to think about when they thought about how do you go about reducing food waste. And for each of those action areas, we do have those lists of both modeled and unmodeled solutions, but also recommendations on financing, policy, innovation, and engagement. And then we also, because we know that's all a lot, have user-specific pages. So we do have pages for, retailers, for food service, and even for capital providers and for policymakers. When we did that, just to give you a peek at the results, we found that if you were to implement all 40 of our solutions, that would result in a diversion of about 45 million tons of food waste. They would have to be implemented fully, though. That means every restaurant and grocery store would have to participate in all of these solutions, et cetera. So we know it's kind of a North Star, but we were excited that when we did that calculation, we did actually hit the 50% reduction target that a lot of people talk about on this issue. And we did a financial analysis with that. We found that it would take an enormous investment of about $14 billion, but have a 5-to-1 return of about 73 billion in the end, with, of course, all of the environmental benefits that come along with it and creating about 50,000 jobs. Here you can see those 7 action areas I mentioned, and you'll see that a lot of them really focus on preventing food from becoming surplus in the first place. That's something that you often see in the hierarchies and the discussion around this, but people skip over because they don't really know what to do there. And so we really tried to articulate better, more specifically, what do we mean when we talk about prevention? I won't go into all of these, but you can learn more about them on our website. And just to give you a sense, under each of those categories, we do have these whole lists of more specific solutions for each of them. Again, won't dive into all of the details, but just to sort of give you that visual along with it. So with that introduction, I will jump right in here and take you to the Insights engine. So here we go. This is the first of our 4 tools, the Food Waste Monitor. And you can see here on the left, you can jump around to the different tools. This is the part where to help you understand the issue. So you can jump on in and you can view this information, but in a lot of different ways, depending on really what you're trying to get out of it. So right now we're looking at the whole food system. We're looking at surplus food tons and where it's going. And so you can see 34% to landfill, 17% not harvested, etc. You can also view it by food type, by causes, by sectors. And then you can also decide which units you want to use. So we were looking at surplus food tons, but you can drop down and view it by value. You'll see that food service gets much bigger, farm much smaller, and by some of the impact categories. So greenhouse gases. There is a big caveat here, which is that the farm level information only looked at produce. We were not able to model animal products or commodity crops yet. And so likely this farm wedge would get significantly bigger in terms of the CO2 footprint when we add those categories, if and when. But in any case, you can see that, for instance, food service, again, gets much larger when you look at it from a greenhouse gas perspective. I'll go back to surplus food tons. You can also view by sector. So let's say you have a project in your community with the restaurants that are there. You can drill down and really look at, okay, well, what is the case in food service? And again, you can see it by destination, food type. I think the causes view is quite interesting for this sector in particular, because you can see that plate waste, which is the food that is served in a restaurant but not eaten on people's plates, is actually a huge part of the problem that we really have not cracked the nut for. Very few projects working on this right now. So to me, that was a big aha when we finally got our results, that this is something we really need to focus more on. And actually in the food service sector only, we do have a breakdown into subsectors such as full service restaurants, healthcare, so there's so many different subsectors. I think there are about 26. You'll see we've ranked ourselves on data quality. That's because there's a lot of information that's really hard to get, and we are not as confident in some of the information here as others. So while it's a 3, let's say a 3 here, when you come over to retail, you'll see we go down to a 1 on our causes, because that was an area where there's really no good information out there, and we had to really just use expert opinion to come to these breakdowns. So our goal is to improve this and have our data quality scores improve over time. I will also note that you can download this data if you want to play with it. Oh, and you can go to your state as well. You can download the data in a few different cuts of data. You can see hundreds of pages of methodology that often will give you some of the factors that we use, in case that's useful, as well as a glossary. So you can find those up on that upper right. So that's the Food Waste Monitor. Second is our solutions database. And here you can see those 7 action areas that I just showed you. And so each of these bars is showing the collective impact of the solutions that fall into that particular action area. And you can view it again by the impact metric you care about. So you can look at the net financials, you can look at tons that could be saved, you can look at the greenhouse gas reductions that are possible. The colors show what our modeled solutions can do, and then the gray is our estimate of kind of what new innovations could achieve, that there is more food that maybe is not being captured by the existing solutions we were able to model. So we call that the remaining opportunity. So you can click around and view it that way. You can also come down and see it by specific solutions. So these are the 42 that we were able to model. And again, you can kind of jump around by impact. You can view it for the whole food system, which is what we're doing, or you can jump in and view it for a particular sector. So here we have the retail sector is what I chose. And you can kind of view, and then like the economic calculations adjust so that it's just showing the retail financials. You know, in some cases, you might have a grocery store have to pay something and the consumer saves the money. So that would come out as a negative on this, because this is just showing the economics for the retailer themselves. So you can do it that way. This is, again, still calculating kind of for the whole food system, but if you're working with individual businesses, you may want to come and just do it per ton, because I think that helps sort of show which solutions have the best bang for buck for businesses to implement themselves. And so that you can see here. So let's hop in, and then you can hop in and view more details. So we'll hop into one, and you can see that each one has a fact sheet that has more information on that particular solution that you can read about, examples where we have them, and the more specific numbers. If that winds up being a solution of interest, you can actually go straight from the fact sheet to our solution provider directory. Right now we have about 700 organizations entered in here, but I will say that that's just a start. We're really hoping to expand it. One way that you might be able to use this in your own community is to actually encourage organizations in your community to apply, and then we will add them to this list, because then you can sort, for now just by state, but at least, you know, you can sort to your state and then they will pop up. So if you have businesses in your state and you want them to be finding the organizations in your state, I would encourage you to have those organizations apply so we can get them in there, and we're happy to host that. So once the organization is in here, you can click in and get more information about them, including where they operate. This one doesn't have it, but oftentimes you'll have a kind of states where they operate in. And then also contact information. So this has been useful. This is also something we are using kind of as a way to help investors find more startups and companies to invest in. So you'll see we actually have information on investments made, staff size, and we'll be adding to this via a partnership with PitchBook, so that we're really trying to, again, foster the investment into some of these technologies that we see really working. So that's part of the vision here as well. Similarly, foundations can be using this to identify nonprofits that they want to support, again, for instance, in their particular geography or whatever they're searching for. They can kind of filter in here. Lastly, and this is more the calculator side of things, and that's been pretty popular, is our impact calculator. Now, Jared mentioned that we are trying to work together with EPA and WARM around greenhouse gas emission factors. When we went in to build this tool, we realized that the WARM tool did not have the level of specificity on food waste that we were hoping for. And so we actually, and that's not to knock with the WARM tool, it's an incredible tool and an incredible start to everything, but we just saw an opportunity to create more specific things. So we commissioned Qantas, which is an international life cycle analysis firm, to create more specific emission factors for us. They're more specific than the WARM tool because they are by sector. So actually, a tomato has a different footprint on farm than it does by the time it's gotten to someone's household. And so that's reflected in the different factors, as well as in what the results you get in this calculator. So that's one way they're more specific. So let's just say we're looking at residential food waste. We also had them calculate emissions factors for more types of products that can hopefully roll up to help the WARM categories. So you'll see, and we've rolled them up here, but in produce, for instance, we have 11 different produce items that are informing this produce greenhouse gas factor. So, but we'll just pick our standard mix for this calculator, and then it's available in different units. So if you're just doing something in pounds, you can do that here. So you can go in and you can say what you're doing. Let's say we're looking at a residential, implementing a residential composting program where it's currently going to landfill. So here are all of the destinations to choose from. And that's actually the third way where our emission factors are a bit more specific. There are some destinations in here that you won't find in WARM, such as sewer. But so let's say that, at this point we know that 10,000 tons are going to landfill and another 2,000 to sewer. This will add up very quickly the footprint of that. So if you're just trying to document what the footprint of food waste is in your community, you can do that. And let's say you were trying to roll out, both donations and composting, and maybe you're looking at something where you have about 1,000 tons donated. That would actually be impressive. It's a lot of food, but so 1,000 tons donated, and maybe 5,000 going to compost, and then still 1,000 to sewer and 5,000 to landfill. Whatever your mix is, you can enter that all in, and it will very quickly calculate the scenario differences for you. So this, we see as a way to either document impact or do some scenario planning for different programs in your community. With that, I will jump back to just one other tool that I just wanted to kind of let you know about. I won't dive in too deeply, but it's just something in case you do have a program in your community where you're working with grocery stores. A separate calculator that we have created is what we call the U.S. Grocery Retail Food Loss and Waste Calculator. And that is really meant for grocers to help them calculate how much waste they have and really see it. And it simplifies it because they're able to put in their financial information but get results in pounds. And it also, if they are part of any of the programs like EPA Food Recovery Challenge, it kind of auto-populates forms that they can then send in to the different initiatives that are currently asking those businesses to report information. And it allows them to do all of this on their desktop. So they put their financial information in, but that's not what they need to share. That it kind of populates a different form that they can share without actually sharing their financials. Just to note that that's something that we have available. If it's of interest, please contact us. It's not kind of up on the website. It needs a little bit of hand holding, but it's something we do have available to share. And we're working on one for the manufacturing industry as well. And that's in pilot mode right now, but it will be coming soon. So with that, I will pass it back to Lynn. I'm sure there's a little discussion that people are hoping to have.
Oh, yes, Dana, sensational. And there are many questions for all of you. Thank you so much. There's been a couple of questions about links, and I want to point out again that there's a handout available that has all the links. It's also on the NERC website, but you can download it right now from the dashboard. Dana, you exist. There she is. Wonderful, wonderful. And Terry, you've got 15 minutes to wow the world. Take it away. Thank you.
Wow. Those were great presentations. Really appreciated all of that. A ton of information, lots of questions. We'll get to as many as we can, but it's hard to group them because it's so specific to the different models you guys have been talking about. So I'm going to do a couple on worm and then try to move around so we get each of you engaged. So one of the first questions is for you, Jared. Is there any plans to make a more code-based version of worm available? Worm available, something like or an R package? I'm not an IT person.
Neither am I. So the short answer is probably not anytime soon. I guess the possibility is there, but considering how widely used worm is and how much of probably a small percent of the user base would be interested in that application. So we'll probably focus more on other interface options, but it's definitely good to know that there's interest in that. And if that grows, then that would increase the chances of that happening.
So Jared, there's a question for you, but there's a bunch of questions related to sort of how reuse factors into these different models you guys have been talking about. So in the case of worm, the question is, does source reduction include reuse? And for the rest of you, there are sort of general questions about how reuse factors into your model and whether there's, one of the last questions is, better models for really tracking the impacts of reuse.
So in worm, source reduction is distinct from reuse. We currently don't model reuse in worm because we model so many different types of materials and we do them all individually. So figuring out what reuse means for each and every one of those materials is a big undertaking. And so we're working this year to actually develop or to explore that a little more to see how many materials would reuse be, I guess, feasible for in worm, and to hopefully be able to implement at least a reuse pathway for some material types in the future, in the coming years. So currently, we don't explicitly measure reuse in worm, but our documentation chapters do highlight a sort of, I call it back of the envelope, but that might be talking down to it a little, but a back of the envelope calculation for being able to do reuse calculations using worm data, but sort of outside the context of the tool itself. So that's available in our documentation chapters on our website, but reuse isn't quite explicitly in worm yet.
Okay, thanks. Patty, do you want to address any aspects of sort of reuse in your modeling?
Yeah, exactly. So for reuse, we do a product life extension where that's really where the user is extending the life beyond the given time frame. Okay, so if it's a 4-year average lifespan, they're extending that beyond. For reuse, it's really when a product is donated. So we actually do calculate that as replacing the purchase of a new product But when we do that, we account for certain types of certain type of refurbishment. So for example, for a mobile phone, you're going to want to replace the battery, for example. So you're not going to, assume that that battery is going to be, it's just going to go with the product. So we actually deduct that from the net benefits, for example.
Okay.
And all our documentation is also on our website. So each of the products is different, et cetera, but it's all documented.
Okay, so I'm going to try to move this around a little. There's lots of questions here. With the Recon tool, Jared, would there be a way to see the environmental benefits of reducing use of materials? For example, having an office go paperless. So you gave that, office paper example. Could you still have a greenhouse gas and energy impact with the devices? They're just interested in how that might work. The true sort of upstream source reduction impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that analysis would actually be better suited for warm. You could use warm for that exact purpose. If you're maybe not so much for the purchasing aspect, but if you wanted to understand even if you're recycling a bunch of paper and then next year your company source reduces that instead, you could at least see what that might be from the paper aspect, what those benefits might be. So actually, warm might be a better tool for that analysis.
So, so this is Lynn. So one of the calculators that we weren't able to present today is the paper network calculator. There is a link to that, and specific to paper, you can actually do a calculation for avoided paper use. And that's what I use for paper use reduction in the State Electronics Challenge. So, and it's also a very easy calculator to use, and you will find a link to that in the that handout. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
Thanks, Lynn. That's great. Also on Recon, there's a question about, is there a way to add compost use to Recon? For example, procuring compost for a project compared to fertilizer and peat use.
I don't think Recon gets that specific. So I'm very new to Recon, only the last couple of months. So I can look into that a little more, but I don't think Recon has that type of information.
Okay. Well, there's some thoughts. So Patty, for you, does the environmental benefits calculator account for region of purchase, manufacture versus region of use, transport between the two?
Okay, so the region of use is merely for the product use phase. We have to recognize that the electronics industry is a global supply chain. So regardless of where you're purchasing that product, it was probably sourced, those components, from all over the world and assembled and then transported. So the answer is we do not look at the life cycle calculations are based on life cycle data from manufacturing worldwide, but we do not differentiate where you purchase the product because of the global nature of the electronic supply chain. In a product, it's really going to be the same no matter where you're purchasing it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try to bring Dana into this. Dana, in the refed engine, does manufacturing include livestock used for meals? What is included in manufacturing?
Manufacturing does include animal products, yes. And it does include dairy as well. So it just kind of depends, on the particular food product. It's only food products. So for dairy, for instance, it would include whey and the whole process in cheese making or yogurt making, if that's the product, and it's kind of done product by
product. Okay, another follow-up question. Do the refed numbers for, quote, surplus food include only the edible portion or both edible and inedible?
They include both edible and inedible. Yeah, right now. So it would be natural that a certain portion, we'd be sending to compost, right, rather than we're getting that number down to 0.
Okay. Let me go back up and sort of circulate some of these questions. This is for you, Jared. Does warm assume 100% virgin material? Is there a way to connect WARM and Recon so you can set a specific recycled content amount as part of WARM?
So I would have to see exactly what the settings look like in WARM, but there are some settings that can be used to pick the mix of materials being used at the manufacturing stage. So I know there's a way to use either the current mix or what's considered the current mix in the market, so the percentage of virgin versus percentage recycled going into manufacturing, and that can be changed to some degree. I don't think you can connect Recon specifically with it, but I think the idea is still there in the settings for WARM.
Okay, this is a sort of question to illuminate more. When you say cars off the road, is that equal to how many miles these cars would have driven, or how big / efficient of a car we're talking about? Are you talking about like a small car, an SUV, a truck? And what kind of vehicles are you sort of using in that sort of output of your model?
Yeah, and I think the sort of assumptions there is that it's a passenger car driven for the average miles that are driven, that probably comes from the Department of Transportation, as well as sort of the average miles per gallon you could expect from the average passenger car. So I think all those factors kind of come into play.
So it's more of a sort of global average of vehicles. Okay, thanks. So this is for you, Patty. The GC calculator calculates the benefits of purchasing ePeat devices compared to what? Products of similar type that are not ePeat. There seems to be a baseline case here. And so there's a question of sort of what is that baseline?
Yeah, so we basically calculate a baseline, and it's based on it's based on a bill of materials, and then the bill of materials and the life cycle data is basically adjusted for criteria in ePeat. So, for example, it would assume, let's say, recycled content, for example, of the product. Let's say it would assume 0% recycled plastic content in the baseline product. But then it would be adjusted to account for, say, 25% of recycled plastic. So that's how it's done. So it is a baseline, and our documentation outlines what the baseline is. So for Energy Star, we actually work with the U.S. Energy Star program to define what that baseline is. So it's every criterion is a kind of a different baseline, if you will, because we have to define what a non-EP product looks like.
Okay, Dana, I'm trying to find something for you to comment. So this is a general question for all of you. It's maybe a little provocative, but what are your general thoughts on greenwashing by manufacturers, i.e. an overemphasis on changes within product content versus actually reducing impact and emission-heavy production? So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. It's kind of a global question.
I'll take that one.
Okay, thanks, Patty.
So for ePeat, we are actually, we've just done a state of sustainability research report on climate change mitigation for the ICT sector, and it's up on our website. And what we basically have done is documented the science, okay? And where are those impacts coming from in the life cycle? Well, I tell you, we need to be moving upstream. It's all about embodied carbon. It's about the energy sources that you're using to power and your manufacturing facilities, whether you're using, coal versus renewable energy, but also the energy efficiency as you're manufacturing the various components. That's really where the impacts are. And so we are actually diving more and more into that, because now we are looking at this science and saying, particularly for products that are operating on batteries and they're not actually consuming electricity during use, you have the impact upstream can be as much as 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions. Not the same for, servers and network equipment that, that you plug into the wall when you're using. But those battery operated devices, we need to get upstream into the life cycle of, and reduce the emissions in manufacturing.
Thanks, Patty. We're almost out of time. Dana, somebody's asking about the group you talked about joining, and I think that's your ReFed Action League, if I'm not mistaken. Is that, maybe you could repeat that information about how to join?
I will, you know what, I will put it in the chat so that people can go.
Okay.
There's a link, so I'll get that up right now for everyone.
Okay.
We're still working on getting the web page together, so you won't exactly find it there.
Okay. I don't know who's showing these slides or these visuals, but I think, Lynn, you're going to switch to our upcoming events. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask, I think it's Jared, one final question. What about other bulky items like mattresses, appliances, furniture, those sorts of products?
So I think I'm trying to think back to the materials list. I know we have some durable goods, but I don't think those are factored in currently. But because we mostly focus on things I would categorize as MSW or C&D, so I don't know if those would factor in or make up enough of a percentage that we would include those, but I could look into those.
Okay, thanks, Jared. I think, Lynn, with the last remaining few seconds, do you want to throw up the slide about the upcoming webinars that we're offering? Do you have that, or should I do that? Maybe Lynn, we lost Lynn. In any case, well, I want to thank all of you. These were great presentations. I'm so sorry we didn't get to all the questions that folks have. I can make those questions available to you guys, and if we want, we can coordinate maybe on answering some of them and making that information available. This was a great presentation. We're getting a lot of sort of kudos from people in the question box. Let's see if I can manage to make myself. Lynn, are you there with the slides on the upcoming presentations? I don't think so. Let's see if I can become the presenter and show you that. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the upcoming joint NUMOA-NERC webinars that we've got planned, oops, it went away, I think, at least on my screen. We've got an upcoming webinar on lithium-ion batteries on June 14th, and this will focus on actual recycling of lithium batteries, how that works, ways to make it greener. Please join us for that webinar next week. We have another webinar coming up on the 17th on the spectrum of approaches to U.S. packaging and extended producer responsibility. I think this is going to be a great webinar. This webinar is a NERC, NUMOA, and PSI webinar, so all three organizations are co-sponsoring that. There's a lot of activity on EPR for packaging going on legislatively in the U.S. right now. And then in July, on the 14th of July, we have a webinar. Hopefully, Dana, we can get you guys interested in this on growing the upcycled food economy. That'll be July 14th at 1 o'clock Eastern. So please join us for these webinars. Again, I want to thank our great panel today. We're getting lots of kudos and great praise in the question box. And I think I'm going to wrap it up now. Everyone have a good day and take care.
Great, thank
Bye-bye.
you
So much.